Hey, I'm Scott Kennedy, and we are here to talk Penn State football prospects and the NFL draft. And frankly, Penn State was in the news for a couple of big-time reasons last week with Micah Parsons and Jayson Oweh, and what they did at their pro day was insane, to say the least. It was the word freak gets thrown around a lot, but these are legitimate numbers and legitimate descriptions of these guys. And we'll go into it about why and some comparisons about just how good their pro day was. We'll talk a few more of the Penn State prospects. We'll talk a little bit about James Franklin and the outlook for the 2021 season. And to do that, I'm going to bring in a close friend of mine, Mark Brennan from FightOnState.com, someone I've worked with for going on 2 decades. Yes, that probably means we're old, Mark. But I want to bring Mark in real quick and say hello, Mark. And I've got a font for you here just so everybody can see where you are. You can find him on @MarkXBrennan and then FightOnState.com. And Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Appreciate being on with you. Love your studio there. It's looking good, looking sharp. But you're right. We're getting a little bit long in the tooth there, a little bit old. But hey, it's always been nice doing stuff with you, and I appreciate you having me on, Scott.
Well, wise, the wisdom. I think that's what it is. But
there you go.
I want to get into a little bit about Micah Parsons. I've got a lot of viewers and stuff from that are following the NFL draft. Specifically, I'm from Atlanta. A lot of Atlanta Falcons fans. And when I saw Micah Parsons come in sub 4.4 at 246 pounds, I said the Falcons have to be doing backflips. And it's not necessarily because they want to draft Micah Parsons, but in my opinion, Micah Parsons just knocked on the door of the conversation of a top 5 pick. Am I wrong on that?
I think it's going to be what teams need. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Does he have top 5 talent? I mean, without question. The thing is, Scott, it's not just his numbers. It's not just his testing numbers, but he's a natural football player. When he was in high school, he was a running back. I saw him at camp here at Penn State working out as a tight end, and one of the best defensive backs at the camp could not guard him. It was unbelievable. He can play anywhere on the field. Just so happens that his best position and at the college level is linebacker. So I think what it's going to boil down to is who needs a linebacker and who is willing to invest with that high of a pick at linebacker. We know that typically teams don't do that.
And for some reason, I think the linebacker position, as a child of the 80s, the linebacker positions were the glamour positions. LT was right there. He made the linebacker position sexy, so to speak. But now it's about getting to the quarterback and then covering the guys. And the guys in the middle kind of get lost. But when you got a good one, So, for me, this isn't just a combine freak. This isn't just a guy who's been sitting out for a year, specializing with these strength and agility camps and making sure that he was ready for this pro day. He's a football player, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was mentioning, you could put him anywhere. I saw him. I wasn't at the game, but State College High School here was playing his team, Harrisburg. And the coaches at State High told me there was a play where they kicked the ball short to try to avoid him. He was returning kickoffs, and the guy in front of him fumbled. He goes up, picks the ball up, and runs for a touchdown. The other thing, Scott, is he's an every down player. So you want to talk about rushing the passer? He was a 5-star defensive end in high school. He could rush the passer here at Penn State. He can drop into coverage because obviously he has the speed to do that, and he can really stick people. So that's what I think sets him apart from a lot of the other linebackers who are out there, is that he will be on the field. He can be on the field for every single down. Even when teams go nickel dime, you could put him out there in any different spot, and he's going to be productive for you.
Well, and as I'm looking at the Atlanta Falcons at 4, the prospect of them taking, there's 2 positions that the Atlanta Falcons are fairly set at: wide receiver and linebacker. But if you start talking about that best available player, Micah Parsons starts fitting that bill a little bit. And the idea of 245 pounds of Micah Parsons next to Deion Jones, who's 215 and can fly for Atlanta, and pairing those 2 at linebacker is a pretty enticing option. I want to move on here to another guy who, frankly, had a better day. He was bigger, faster, quicker, jumped higher, jumped farther, did everything, but not quite the football instincts. We're talking about Jayson Oweh. How have you seen? Because I think the knock on him, reading at FightOnState.com on your site, the knock on him is, he's late to the game. doesn't quite have the instinct. So how have you seen him progress from when he first got there, and what does his trajectory look like?
Well, you mentioned it. He played. He did not play high school football until his junior year of high school, and then his first year at Penn State, he redshirted. He was fortunate enough to play under Sean Spencer, who's now with the New York Giants, who's an outstanding defensive line coach here for that first year or so. And I think what you've seen, the stats are a little deceiving with Oweh. He was credited with no sacks this past year because he didn't have any sacks. He shouldn't have been credited with any, but he was still a first-team All-Big Ten pick. What is that telling you? It's telling you that the coaches realized the impact that he had in getting pressure on the quarterback. Where is he now? The things I mentioned about Micah Parsons being such a natural football player, those are the things that Jayson Oweh lacks. It's going to take him several years to be able to perform at an elite level game after game after game. And I think what scouts and GMs are seeing is this clay that they could mold into what they need it to be. But when you talk about athleticism, when you talk about upside, it's just unbelievable. When he first arrived and they were reporting his 40 times as sub 4 here, you're thinking, I don't know. They're usually pretty good here. And if you look at what they've done in the combine under Dwight Galt, their strength coach, they've done really well. But with him, it's like there was really some legitimate skepticism. So for him to go out and do that at Pro Day in front of all those NFL scouts, it's legit. Now, would that have been an electronic, the same thing? Probably not. But it's going to be a freak number.
I've been on this for 20 years now because when people say, "Oh, he's on a laser," I feel like
right.
Dr. Evil. A laser stop is not an electronic time. And the NFL Combine does it the same way. It's a push button start and it's a laser finish.
Right.
If you are pushing a button, it is hand timed. I don't care if there's a laser finish.
So when you're talking about the numbers that he posted, that's really irrelevant as well, because even if you do lasers or however you want to do it, that was going to be a monster number.
You're fast. I once had a kid tell me when I was running combines at Scout, he's like, "Hey, I ran a 4.48. What can I get down to?" I said, "I don't care. You're fast.
Right.
How can you play? You're fast enough. Now I'm interested. What can you do?" Now, I've said with guys like this that may lack the instincts is with this kind of athleticism is put their hand in the dirt or the rubber pellets, so to speak, and let them go get after the quarterback. You've got one job. Go get that guy on third downs. Can he do that? Is he forget about the instincts. Does he have the tenacity, the motor, and all those type of things to get after the quarterback and become even a third down specialist as well as a high round pick?
Yeah, when he redshirted as a true freshman, I'm forgetting what game it is. I probably should have studied up on this, but in the first game he played, he got in really late, and that's what they did. And he ended up having 2 sacks in that one game. In a matter of, if he had 15 snaps in that game, I would be surprised. And he ended up turning it into 2 snaps. I think that where you're going to run into an issue with Oweh is he's not going to be he may eventually be the defensive end that could drop into coverage or cover a tight end or do things in a 3-4 type setting as an outside linebacker. He has that athleticism, but he doesn't have the natural instinct. So those are the kind of things that he's going to have to be taught how to do. He wasn't really asked to do much of that here at Penn State.
Mark, and I'm blanking on his name. Is it Jabril Peppers, the basketball player from North Carolina that ended up playing with the
Julius
Panthers?
Peppers.
Julius Peppers. Thank you. Jabril Peppers was a safety at Michigan. Yeah. See, I'm getting all my names confused through all these years. Could we end up here? Is that his ultimate upside, do you think? Because that was another freak of an athlete that turned into one heck of an NFL player.
Yeah, I actually covered Julius Peppers against Penn State in the NCAA tournament. Penn State somehow beat that team. And yeah, you talk about that sort of athleticism. Now, I think Peppers ended up being bigger, heavier. And I think that remains to be seen with Oweh. If you look at some of the photos of him from Pro Day, even at 258?
Yeah, 257, call it 260 with a biscuit.
And he looks skinny. So I think he still has room to sort of fill out. Does he maintain that athleticism? I think that's the question. But without a doubt, I think from day one, he's going to be a guy who could come in on third down and rush the passer for you.
Yeah, and a 4-2-1 shuttle, that's cornerback. 6'8" 3 L cone, because forget about the 40. When I'm looking at athleticism,
Right.
I'm looking at the change of direction and the explosion movements, which is the shuttle, the L cone, the broad jump, and the vertical. The 40 is nice for hype, but nobody's running 40 yards in a straight line, except maybe a receiver on a fly route. That doesn't count. So their change of direction is elite. Moving on real quick to Pat Freiermuth, 6'5", 250, the little guy, the little tight end at Penn State's pro day. Now, he had a really nice career at Penn State, despite having it shortened by injury. How's he doing, and how do you think he can end up in the NFL?
Yeah, he didn't do any of the testing. He did run routes and catch passes, which I think were both key for him. As of pro day, he said he was about 2 or 3 weeks out from being able to do. So he's hoping to be able to put some times. I don't know how you actually do that. Maybe go out and run it and have somebody film it and send it around to NFL teams. But I think he's going to be an absolute steal. If somebody gets him in the second round, he came in here and was productive from the beginning, Scott. He played basically 2.5 years and set Penn State's career touchdown record for a tight end with 16 touchdowns. The other thing is he grew up. His brother, I think, was an offensive lineman. I forget, at one of the smaller schools up in New England. So this kid has been a blocker the whole time. That's why he was able to come in at Penn State and contribute as a true freshman. You know, he emerged as a starter and one of the best tight ends in the Big Ten as a true freshman, and he wasn't even an early enrollee. He was a guy who arrived in June. So he hurt his right shoulder. Wisely, I think, after 4 games, decided to get the surgery, try to get as healthy as you can. A lot of people were looking at him as a possible first-round pick before the shoulder injury. I think if somebody has the opportunity to take him, I love the Philadelphia Eagles. They're my team. Mm-hmm. And if they start making moves at tight end, if they were able to pick up a Pat Freiermuth in the second round, that'd be something else. He's also a 2-time team captain. So you're talking about a guy who was a captain as a sophomore and then as a junior when he was hurt. The other nice thing about him last year, Scott, even after he was injured, he showed up at every single game, was on the sideline, was coaching up the younger tight ends who had to fill in for him. Those are the kind of things you see. That was a team that started 0-5.
Yeah,
he could have easily gone and had a surgery and headed out to California to work out and rehab with Micah Parsons. He waited till the season was over, spent time with his team as a leader, and I think people look at that and say, "Hey, you talk about character. That was a big character play."
Well, and Mark, you hate to sound like a ghoul, but in an era where you get to draft, when you really like a guy, you don't mind that they got hurt.
Right.
You're like, yes, maybe I can get this guy in the second.
Yeah, nobody wishes that. And that's the other interesting thing is that, Freiermuth, he's been exceptional with the media. I mean, all these guys have. Parsons was fantastic with the media. Oweh was a little reserved. But Freiermuth, he actually after pro day is like, I'm kind of happy I got hurt, because it showed me I had never faced adversity, and now I had to go through adversity. Now, that's obviously looking for a silver lining. He would have preferred not to be hurt. Yep. But if you have a guy who's taking that mentality after being hurt, rather than just moping, I think that says something about him.
And he'll bounce back and work harder than he ever has when he has it taken away from him like that, and he'll be hungrier. So, like I said, you don't want to sound like a ghoul, but if you're using draft picks and you can get him a little lower as a GM and as a fan, you're happy about that. Now, there's a guy I want to talk about real quick that also, you're not running sub 4.4s at 309 pounds, but Will Fries has been a stalwart at Penn State. And his numbers were good. We're talking 4.53 shuttle. His 5.3 40 is respectable for a guy over 300 pounds. 4.53 shuttle is exceptional for a guy 310 pounds. For context, Micah Parsons was 4.40. So if we were talking 40 times and he said this guy ran a 4.40 and this guy ran a 4.53, you'd say they're both pretty fast. His L cone at 7.7 was good, and his explosion, I mentioned explosion, a 9'7" broad jump. When I was looking at high school kids, Mark, before they'd been through and fully developed and stuff, a 10-foot we considered exceptional. And that's still pretty, and at 300 pounds to jump 9'7" is pretty amazing to me. I don't see this guy getting talked about a whole lot, but at 6'6", 310, with those kind of numbers, can he play?
Well, I think the key for him is his positional versatility. So, I don't know that you're looking at him as entering the NFL as a starter. I don't think anybody's looking at that whatsoever. But when you look at backups in the NFL, what do they carry? Maybe 8 guys on the active roster, sometimes as few as 7. You're talking about a guy who started at left guard, left tackle, right guard, right tackle during his time at Penn State. The only place he hasn't started is center, and I wouldn't put it past him to be able to do that. And also team first attitude. Last year he was starting at tackle, at right tackle. The offensive line wasn't playing well. They ended up shifting him into right guard and bringing in a redshirt freshman, Caden Wallace, who is going to be an absolute beast, and put him opposite Rasheed Walker, who is there. They have a pair of offensive tackles who are really good. Why does that matter? Fries, obviously playing tackle, is going to be something you would know this better than I would, but I would imagine tackle is considered more of an elite type position. That's not to say what the guards don't do. What the guards do isn't good, but he no ego, nothing. What's good for the team? He moved inside, played there, and did a decent job, a nice job. I don't think the offensive line as a whole played as well for a lot of the season until they kind of got all the pieces where they needed them to be late. But yeah, I mean, the positional versatility. It's not Penn State where they have 15 offensive linemen on the roster. In the NFL, you're carrying what, 8? You know this better than I do. 8, sometimes as few as 7 on an active roster on game day. To have a guy who can play all those positions, I think is.
If I can take a guy and plug him in 3 different positions, if someone goes down, even as a number 6 lineman, it sounds like. And you mentioned position versatility and stuff. There was an old saying in basketball: if you're going to miss on a guy, miss on a 7-footer. Right. I kind of said that about the versatility of a guy like this. If you're going to miss on a guy, miss on a guy that's 6'6", 310 pounds. That's running 4 or 5 shuttles. To me,
yeah, well, he's also been healthy, Scott. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, sometimes I think that's overlooked. I mean, I don't think he's missed a game. I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but he started a ton of games at Penn State and was not one of these guys who was banged up all the time.
Well, I think he's someone that, when you're looking for a day 3 pick, fans, and you're looking to solidify the offensive line and who can you get for depth, who might be a sleeper out there, I think Will Fries is definitely someone to look at. Now, before I let you go, I want to talk. You mentioned that 0-5 start. How hot is the seat under James Franklin right now? Did COVID save him, give him a pass? What's the outlook for 2021? Is this thing going to bounce back and get better? Where is Penn State football right now?
Yeah, I think this spring is gigantic. What happened? One of the key things that happened last year, Scott, and I didn't even understand how much of an impact it was going to make. But they brought in a new offensive coordinator, 2 other new offensive assistants, and then they missed all of spring practice. So you go back and you look at the beginning of last year, where they were just dreadful offensively in most of the games. And it's like, oh, okay, this is why spring practice matters. Mm-hmm. And it mattered so much that he wasn't comfortable with what Chiraka was doing. So he let him go and hires Mike Yursich, who was recently at Texas. So it seems like this is a little bit better fit philosophy-wise. I think you're going to see some of the things that they were doing under previous coordinators, Joe Moorhead especially, more things with tempo. And I think being able to have the spring with the new coordinator is going to be gigantic. When will the seat get hot? I mean, look at early this season. Penn State opens at Wisconsin, and then in week 3 plays host to Auburn. So you talk about an 0-5 start last year. You have 2 pretty strong tests early this year. And if they come out and struggle, then I think maybe you're going to see some more grumblings. But I think most people gave him a pass last year, knowing all the changes with the staff and knowing, especially in the Big Ten, clearly some programs handled it better than others. Penn State, Franklin admits that they didn't handle it particularly well. But with the Big Ten, on again, off again, on again, off again, no spring practice, it took them a while to adjust. And I think you give them credit for being able to finish with 4 straight wins, albeit against a lesser level of talent. And that's the other thing in that start last year, Scott. They lost their first 2 losses were to an Indiana team that ended up being better than anybody thought.
Yeah, I call it the season of overreaction. The first couple of weeks of football, it's like you don't know how good that team actually is. Let's wait and see.
That's what I'm saying. Midway of this season, we're going to have a better feel for if that was an aberration or if this is something fans ought to be worried about. And my guess would be, given James Franklin's track record, I think you're going to see them bounce back. Does that mean they're going to beat Wisconsin and Auburn? Don't know about that. But the Big Ten scheduling gods weren't very nice. Sending somebody out to Wisconsin for the opener is a tough one. But, hey, got to take care of business. And that Auburn game should be a lot of fun. It's great to see an SEC team be willing to come up here.
Yeah, my dad might be watching. That might be special to him because he sent his son to Auburn and he went to Penn State. So I think he'll be interested in that one for sure. But
maybe a little wager on the side.
No, I don't. My fandom left college football a while ago. I always joked. I said after you work in the business and you're watching all these kids, you start rooting for the names on the back of the uniform.
There you go.
On the front, especially when your own fans start attacking you because you say you don't particularly like one of their quarterbacks. So on that note, Mark, I want to say thank you for dropping in and giving us all this knowledge. I cannot wait to see these guys in the NFL draft. And I'm personally a big fan of James Franklin. I think that the Big Ten needed some of his swagger, confidence, arrogance, so to speak, when they were all just kind of laying down for Urban Meyer at the time. I was happy to see James Franklin go up there and have some success. But I want to thank you for coming in. Again, that is Mark Brennan. You can find him at @MarkXBrennan at FightOnState.com for the best Penn State coverage there is. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Scott.
So that was Mark. That was Penn State. We were talking Micah Parsons. And again, I think he's got a chance to be a chance to be a top 5 pick. Now, I'll be very surprised if the Falcons were to take him as high as that high. But I had said Penei Sewell was a guy that I really liked at that spot if they didn't go quarterback. And now I'm looking at it, I wouldn't be upset, even though it's not a position of need, if he went number 4 to the Falcons and you paired him up with Deion Jones, because it's been a while since the Falcons have had difference makers on the defensive side of the ball, guys that can end a play, take over a game on the defensive side. And you put Parsons next to Deion Jones, and you've got something there. I want to say thank you for watching. Please join us on Wednesday. I'll post some links and stuff, and if you have questions, we're going to be talking Michigan prospects with my friend Sam Webb, the MichiganInsider.com. So, again, thanks for watching. Hit the comments, hit those like buttons, hit that subscribe button. That's a big help to guys like me and to guys like Mark, and we'll talk to you again soon.